Keough's Corner. This is our last production of the year, and very excited. It's been an awesome time, by the way. I've enjoyed having these conversations with our students from Dover-Sherburne. And so today we have some great students joining, and we've got a series of questions. Not surprisingly, some around next year and kind of our responding to the pandemic. And I'd like to start with Merritt.
Okay, so the first question is, can you tell us more about the plans that are being put in place for next year? Will students have a say in this process?
So the plans for next year are evolving. Let's just put it that way. So it's not like there's a back room over here at the central office and we decide, what the schedules will look like, whether or not we'll have athletics or band or performing arts or fill in the blank. We don't have that option. What I did was ask for support from the school committee and received it for a reopening 2020 task force. And that task force would break into smaller groups, and those groups would then make the recommendations for the school year and what things would look like. So, for example, will we have any remote learning next year? And if so, that this subcommittee of this committee would be looking at those kinds of questions. So they'll talk about, what do we do if a kid can't come to school because they're immunocompromised? What do we do if a teacher can't come to school because they are immunocompromised? What do we do about transportation? Will everyone just squeeze onto buses? Are we going to be taking temperatures? Will kids wear masks? All these many questions are part of this process. However, I said that things are evolving, and it's the truth. Throughout this whole pandemic, things have moved sometimes in the wrong sequence, right? So the cart goes before the horse, and that's never a good thing. For example, and I think I may have mentioned this last time, when we closed on March 13th, the governor came out that day and said he didn't think that schools needed to be closed. Then on the 15th, he actually did close the schools for 2 weeks, all schools. So you didn't have a choice at that time. So on the 13th, we chose to close. By the 15th, he was telling people, no, everyone's closing. Well, it's the same thing with the remote learning, phase 1, phase 2, such and such amount of time on Zoom. This is what the schedules will look like. The schedules were kind of up to us, but the amount of time, there were strong recommendations coming from the state, mainly from the Department of Education. And so we try to honor those recommendations. The same will hold true for next year. Just last week, I learned again. So I put this task force together, and then I learned last week, actually on June 15th, we'll get guidance from the state about what your schedules should look like. And so that's a little late because I had just made a statement to our community that we're going to be looking at possible schedules. And if the state's going to tell us what our schedules will look like, then I don't need to have that piece of the task force look at that question. And the language that the Commissioner of Education used was that these will be 85 to 95% prescriptive. So the guidelines for us coming back, if it's 85 to 95% prescriptive, what does that mean? Do you guys know? They're deciding. They're going to prescribe what we're going to do. So if they say it's going to be a week on, week off, it's going to be a week on, week off. If they say it's going to go rotating 1 day in, 1 day out, then it's going to be 1 day in, 1 day out. But whatever it is, it's going to be whatever they recommend. So in terms of students having a say in it, doesn't sound like it. Doesn't even sound like superintendents are going to have a say in it. So, yeah. That said, of course, we're going to listen to you guys, and if you have ideas or suggestions, I will definitely listen. You may not know this, but my dissertation was actually on student voice. That's what I wrote it about, because I believe that when you listen to kids, they know exactly what's going on in schools, and they can tell you pretty much most of the time what's working and what isn't. So you can always write to me, or reach out and let me know what you're thinking if you have ideas about next year. It was a long-winded answer, but that's the truth. So Lila, do you have a question for me? Lila, is she frozen? She's frozen. Okay, let's go with you, Mike.
All right. So next question is, what will after-school programs look like for athletes, clubs, and performing arts?
That too is, it just hasn't been established yet. It just hasn't been established, so I don't know. It's so complicated, right? It's kind of like the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball are trying to figure out, can these sports take place? Well, baseball's different, right, than football. Football, a lot of physical contact, sweating, and just breathing in each other's faces. Not necessarily so much with some of our other sports. So I think that like the planning for the school year, there'll be the same kinds of guidance from the state in terms of what is acceptable and what isn't. In that case, a lot of that guidance will probably come from the Department of Public Health, because they'll be saying, look, if you're not supposed to be within 6 feet of each other, how are you going to play football?
Right.
How are you going to play soccer? What about cross country? So, I'm worried about that, because I think it's so important to the kids in our school system. They like their sports, and I think it's a good release for kids. So I hope that we will find a way to still have athletics or other after-school activities. But I know that when we have performances like musicals and stuff, that there are a ton of kids on the stage, and they are definitely closer than 6 feet from each other. So the sad news, the honest news, is probably some of these things are going to be in jeopardy, I would say. Being realistic, nobody's told me that. I'm just thinking realistically, and I think you guys are smart enough to do the calculations yourselves. But that said, who knows? Lots of things can happen. They could come up with a vaccine that's just 100%, or the thing could just disappear. So a lot can happen. There's one message I have for the kids at Dover Sherburne, and I was thinking about this specifically with our graduates. Being able to adapt in life to things that you don't like is like #1 skill. It's just the way it is. You could have a boss you don't like. I'm sure your parents say this to you all the time. You could have a boss you don't like. You could, just not like the way our government leaders are acting. There's just a million things that could go wrong. You could suffer tremendous loss like I have, and lose family members, and you don't get a choice in that. It's just the way it goes. And so being able to adapt to the hardships of life are just something that we all have to do. And as sorry as we can be for our kids about things like athletics, if it doesn't make it, I know that you guys are strong, and you're smart, and you're resilient people, and you'll find other ways to entertain yourselves, just as the kids are now. So I hope that answers your question, Mike.
Thank you. Yeah.
Lila.
The next question is, what will school look like next year regarding transportation, class size, lunch, and gym class?
Right. So similar to what I was saying before, next week. So that's not, June 15th, it's a week from now. The week of June 15th, we're supposed to get our guidance from the state, and it's 85 to 95% prescriptive. So they're going to tell us. They're going to tell us whether or not we can have lunch in the cafeteria. They're going to tell us whether or not our buses have to be, cut in half in terms of the numbers of riders. They will tell us. What were some of the other pieces? What were the three pieces, Lola?
Class size, but you said that they would tell you.
Right, class size. So class size is something that they will tell us. And what I am hearing, what's being kind of leaked, is that you're not going to have more than 10 to 12, max 12 kids in a classroom. So what does that mean? If you could only have 12 kids in a classroom and we have classes of 24 kids at times, what would we do? Sarah, you have a question?
Yeah, just relating to what you're saying, like, I know DS is very fortunate to have, for the most part, like smaller class sizes compared to like other schools. So, and I guess for DS too, like if we were gonna cut classes in half, which I know is out of everyone's control, but how would we have the space or like teachers or ability, and like other schools that don't have as many teachers or as much space,
Or
just
or finances. I mean,
Yeah.
Dover Sherburne, we don't rely as much on state aid. We rely on basically private homeowners' tax revenues, right? Your family, we don't have a Natick Mall. Your families pay the taxes that pay for the schools. They come from private residences. So, but because we don't rely as much on the state, we have been able to somehow maintain over the years, and even going back to when I was a kid, somehow been able to maintain this model. So if we had to add some people, I suppose we could, maybe, who knows, right? I mean, who knows? The town property values could drop like a rock, and suddenly the towns could say, actually, not only can we not add people, but you need to cut people. There's a lot of what ifs. And your point about some communities being able to do it and others not, by that I mean if you had to add staff or something like that. I think this is why the governor and the commissioner are saying they're throwing this idea of week on, week off. Because what they're thinking is kids are in 1 week and then they are out doing their learning remotely. So that is how I think it's going to work. But I just don't know concretely. What I can tell you is this: I don't think Dover or Sherburne can double our teaching staff. In fact, I 100% know we can't. There's no way. That's not happening. So there's always questions just about class sizes. When we want to add a section, for example, at Chickering or Pine Hill, say we just wanted to add one section to kindergarten because the classes, there's 4 sections and they're averaging 24. That seems awfully high for a kindergarten class. So if we want to add one teacher, which is roughly, 55,000, 60,000 for one teacher, that gets a lot of scrutiny in town. People are like, whoa. 24 is not that bad. And other people will say, parents will say, no way, 24 is way too high for kindergarten kids to get the kind of attention that they need. It should be more like 16 or 17. So these debates go on all the time for one teacher. Never mind splitting our staff or adding an additional, 50% or of teachers or educators. Those are big questions. So I think that the reason the state is saying this, day on, day off, or some kind of schedule like that, is so that the kids would be remote sometimes and in the other. Does that make sense, Sarah?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, you're up next, Sarah.
The next question is, What is the school doing to address and educate the community about racism when we return to campus?
Great question. And I want to ask you guys some stuff about that. But so you may or may not know this, but when I first came here, I did what they call an entry plan. You guys would have no idea. I'm sure you were like probably 8th grade, or you're mostly juniors. You guys all juniors? Yeah. So you would have been coming into 9th grade when I came here. Well, one of the things that a superintendent does when he or she enters a new school system is they do an entry plan. And when I first started out in administration, I would just go and I would ask people what's working and what isn't, and what would you like to see happen, and what would you like from me as your new leader, and they would tell me. And I'd say, thank you very much. We've come a long way with entry plans, and now this entry plan that I did this time, I interviewed kids, I interviewed parents, I interviewed teachers, I had open office hours that summer that I started. I had parent coffees. I listened to as many people, the leadership team, as many people as I possibly could about what was working and what isn't. And in doing that, we developed kind of 5 big areas to focus on. So like making sure that our learning is as cutting edge as possible, and it's not just a teacher stands in front of the kids and blah blah blahs, but actually the learning is really somewhat experiential and innovative instruction, getting out of the box a little bit, doing things a little differently to try and make the learning as meaningful as possible. So that was one of our big goals. Another one was taking care of the kids' social emotional well-being, because we found over time that kids are struggling just kind of with their own feelings about themselves. Social emotional well-being was a priority for us. Making sure our facilities are where they need to be, and that we're not wasting money, making sure that we're thinking like a community. These were all big goals that came out of my entry plan and became part of our strategic plan. And if you went on the website, you'd see that. Most people don't listen or think about strategic plans, especially kids. But one of the things that was a big priority in our strategic plan was this cultural responsiveness. And what the leadership team especially was saying to me is, we think we can do a lot better. Not just teaching about ethnicity or race or religion, but acknowledging that we have all sorts of different people in our school system. And we don't all grow up, for example, with, two-parent households. We don't, contrary to popular belief, not everyone has lots of money in Dover and Sherburne. Some people have a very tight budget, and that puts stressors on them. Some kids can only afford a junkie car. Other kids can drive a Corvette. Race is a big part of that, right? So what we were saying was that we would like to be more culturally responsive as a school system, acknowledge differences, teach about differences, ensure that that every person feels as if they have that they are equally valued, and that they have an equal right to their seat in this school. So this was a priority. And I'm pretty psyched about it because it aligns very well with my own personal thinking, my own philosophy as an educator. So we've gone after it, and we've gone after it with things that sometimes the kids would say, oh, that's just so stupid and so trite, like the hashtag WeAreDS. The whole point behind that originally was to say, every single person here has a right to this place, and every single person is a member of the DS community. Anyone who thinks they have more of a right to it, they're wrong. So we were concentrating on this. We've had like professional development days to educate our educators about race, issues of race, class, etc. And for example, we've had we did some things differently. In fact, my first year, Mr. Smith there was some racial graffiti in the bathroom. Mr. Smith organized an all-school meeting and a panel event. Do you remember that? It was your freshman year. That hadn't happened at Dover Sherman for a long time, if not ever. That may have been the first time that we as a school system called out that kind of hatred. And we've been working on it ever since, but we're not there. We are definitely not there. And but we're doing things like talking about requiring all new teachers, anyone who comes to work here has to have taken what they call ideas. It's an ideas course. So if you could look it up sometime and read about it, it is all about teaching people, especially about race, but just about being culturally responsive and recognizing differences and valuing differences. And instead of saying, well, we hope everyone kind of takes this, we're actually going to be more deliberate. We have been saying, we're strongly encouraging all of our new teachers to do it. We're actually coming forward this year saying, yeah, it's not optional. If you're going to teach here, you need to have taken that class. And we're going to continue to concentrate on it and to double down on it. But I think we need kid input on this as well. I think we also recognize that, you know, Boston's a long way from Dover and Sherburne, and that puts a big strain on the kids, and it makes it difficult for the relationships to necessarily flourish the same way they would if you lived right down the street from each other, where you could hang out as little kids together. So we're trying to be more thoughtful about it and trying to engage kids in conversations about this, but I think we still have a long way to go. We did just have a conversation because of all of the stuff going on in the news, and that's not how it should be, right? We shouldn't be reacting. We should be doing this all the time, and I want you to know that we are doing it all the time, but we did also react because we were disheartened by the events out across our country in recent times, these needless losses of life. We had a discussion on Friday with a group of our Boston students, and many leaders and counselors were in the Zoom chat, and it was really powerful. But I can tell you some of the things that I heard that day. Somebody said they were glad that people are finally taking notice about issues of race. DS should concentrate on learning more about METCO. It's tiring to always be the person who has to talk about race. Like, what's it like to be Black? That's tiring for kids. Or Asian, whatever. Or having to be the person who is of color in the classroom when a topic like slavery comes up. Or kind of a tricky political issue between the US and some fill-in-the-blank Asian country. You know, these are uncomfortable situations, or Middle Eastern descent. So these are tough discussions, and I think the kids are, the Boston kids anyhow, are saying that that we should be talking about it more. So is that what you said, Sarah? Like talking about it more or something like that?
Do you just mean like the original question?
Yeah.
It was, what is the school doing to address and educate the community about racism when we return to campus? So I guess just like definitely it's going to be different because we wouldn't be able to have like a school-wide assembly, but maybe just like in classrooms if we were going to meet, or how we would make sure that this isn't just like a phase of us talking about it, to make sure that it's consistent in the future and that something actually does change.
So I want to ask you guys, so you can unmute yourselves. I want to ask you guys to weigh in, maybe just raise your hand, but do you think we could do a better job as a school system on issues of race? Have you ever thought about that, or thought about whether or not, like, have you ever seen situations that have gone down in the school where you've said, that's just not right? I mean, I think we should do better than that. stuff like that, Sarah?
I mean, I think we do a good job, but I also don't think that we're the right people, or for me personally, like I don't think I would be the right person to ask. Like I know we have a lot to grow as everyone else does, but I think maybe the people that are directly affected would have like a better um opinion, or not opinion, but way to handle it in a way that they think would be effective, because maybe something I think wouldn't actually be helpful, or I don't know.
Well, because you haven't lived, for example, the Black experience.
Yeah.
So, right. I agree. I agree. I can't know what that's like. When I drive through town, I don't worry about police pulling me over and my skin color being a determinant as to whether or not they'll treat me well or not. I'm not saying that that's what goes on in Dover or Sherburne, but um, but from what I'm hearing from kids and from people in the past few weeks, to be a Black American, that's a very really scary thought. I don't know if any of you guys have read The Hate You Give. Have you read that? So Lila and Merritt, you did. What jumped out at you from the book? Anything that stuck?
I read it like quite a long time ago, so or like when it just came out, so I can't think of one thing that was striking, but I think it was just all striking to me. Like it's kind of eye opening.
Because it was a lot. It's definitely a lot like what we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
I mean, was she a prophet? What about you, Lola? Did anything jump out at you from that book or stick with you?
I read it a while ago too when it like came out, but I think probably just like to relate it to now, just the division and like how like different the people felt, and that like both sides didn't understand. Not both sides, but just like the division. Like in the story, it's the two people, it's the two girls, and like how they had totally two different views, and like I think that now people are recognizing that, and so I think that was like fascinating because you just don't expect there to be such a big difference in opinion on like basic rights and that type of thing.
Yeah. No, it was really. I just found it to be. She told the story of, if you ask me, a Boston kid going to Dover Sherburne. It was like right there. And that's how it was when I was growing up here. So, and I wouldn't say uh, we've made a lot of progress in that way. So I think that we can do better. I want us to do better. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I think Dover's one of those areas where people are pretty affluent and educated on issues like this, and I guess hold ourselves to like act as a to like a higher standard, something like that. So I think compared to other areas, especially areas where there's protests right now, I think that you know at Dover Sherburne we don't really like see color or gender, sexual orientation, stuff like that. I don't think it's just about gender. So especially in like the non-discrimination statement at the end of the emails, what it says
Yeah.
like don't discriminate against ABC XYZ.
Yeah, well, so this is one of the things that I have learned along the way. Um, I I think I really was absolutely advantaged as a
Right.
white kid. I think I was advantaged. Like I said, I didn't have to worry about people thinking I was trying to rip off their store if I went in. I I guess, I I I just over time have come to see when I hear things like systemic racism, like I can think of a million instances where people said or did things that were just it just smacked of racism. It just did. And so I don't know. I think you're right, Mike. I think people here are well educated and understand, but we have to check ourselves every once in a while, look in the mirror and see how we're doing. How are we measuring up to what we supposedly believe in? That's good. Dan, Luke, Alan, any of you guys have anything to weigh in?
No, I think you guys ask all good questions, and I have no question about it.
Cool, awesome. Luke?
No, same as Alan.
Okay. Dan, you got anything to add?
No, I'm good.
Okay. I thought you might have dozed off for a second there.
No, I had some issues unmuting. My bad.
I gotcha. Any other questions that we didn't necessarily speak to? Any other thoughts or questions about the year, or otherwise I'll tell you what I'm up to this summer, if that works. All right. So, well, one thing I know is that we're going to be meeting a lot more frequently around here as we do plan. Even if the state does give us this prescriptive guidance, we're still going to have a lot of planning to do to think about what school's going to look like, and logistically, some of it could be really, really challenging. So I know that we're going to meet as a leadership team, so the principals and myself and any other leaders in the school system will meet every week to talk about our progress towards getting ready for reopening. We're going to have joint school committee meetings every other week, so that will allow me an opportunity to tell the school committee what's going on, give them updates on what the school year would look like. So anyone can get on those, including you guys. Those are public meetings, so they're open to anybody who wants to hear, what's happening. So so I'll be doing that, and then I certainly hope to get some time off. I go down to Mattapoisett in the summer and have a boat down there, and I just love the house that I live in, and it's right near the water, and I'm hoping to get some rest and just get out there and just relax a little bit, because this has been hard. It's been hard for us too. I know it's been hard for you guys. It's been hard for us too. It's been hard for everyone. And I really think it's true. It's like you're working twice as hard, but you're just like, you feel like you're like working through like molasses or mud. You're like, your feet just aren't really moving as fast. It just doesn't feel smooth. And that's kind of how it's been for us too. So it's been a tough year, but we'll get there, right? Yes. And next year you'll be seniors. Will you all be seniors? Yes, awesome. Good. All right, so any other questions for the good of the order? Sarah?
No, I don't think we have anything else.
Okay, good. Well, it was awesome seeing you guys. I hope you have a nice summer, that you find time to relax. Very much appreciate these opportunities to speak with you. Next year, Mr. Sweeney, I know you're listening. Next year, I am going to do much less talking and a lot more listening, because I don't feel like I get to hear from you guys enough. But you're shy. It's hard to pull the info out of you. All right? So thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you soon.